Bookseller Crow, almost live.
Good evening, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Bookseller Crow. We're really excited tonight because we have Chris Neill interviewing his friend Isy Suttie. And for you, those of you who don't know Chris Neill, he is an acclaimed writer and has his fourth series called Enigma on Radio 4 at the moment. And he started off as a stand-up, so we'll see how funny he is still. And Isy Suttie is here as well, and she is going to be talking about her new debut novel, Jane is Trying, and as you'll probably be aware, she's already written her memoir, and also a radio series, Love Letters, which won a gold Sony. So she's a brilliant all-rounder, I'd say, and an actress, sorry. You probably know that as well. But I won't go on anymore. So please put your hands together and give them a very warm welcome. Oh, shut the door!
Why can't the door stay open?
Because you have to see the birds.
Oh, I see. Oh. You have to see the birds. Look at the birds. There we are. Darling, could you do the water?
Yes. Chris has broken his hand.
I haven't. Someone said to me, I've broken a finger, and someone said it was like a trial for being an old person. I had a slight fall in the garden that I can't quite work out how I did. So I have to sort of, I see, I can write notes, now I can't write anything, so I just have to hope that I've written the right words here.
But it does look like you've been having a fight in Wetherspoons.
It so does. That's what caused it to close down. It got so rough in there. There we are. Well, we're going to talk about Isy's book, aren't we? Yeah. And other things. And I thought, well, we both thought, if you have an urgent question to put to Isy, maybe you could put your hands up and let us know. We don't need to all do it at the end. We thought that was a quite nice thing, wasn't it? So
you know that thing, I don't know how many of you have been to these events, but sometimes at like 45 minutes, like, has anyone got any questions? And then your mind goes blank and you can't. Yeah. I can't anyway.
And then one person puts their hand up and goes, do you think you should be better? And then we go, right, okay, no, that's great. Well, it's been a lovely evening, so we thought we'd try and avoid that, and if we could do some throughout, make it a sort of group effort. So there we are. But I could do the first one. So this is Isy's new first novel. You've written a memoir already, haven't you?
Yes.
The actual one, and then but this is the first novel, Jane is Trying, and it is for sale tonight. Let's just put that out there, and but we're gonna talk about the book and anything else that sort of comes up along the way. I obviously, having done my work and the fact that Isy is a friend, have read the novel, and I have to say it's a fantastic novel. It's a very clever combination of being very funny in places and very moving, and there's a really strong propulsion with the story. There are various elements which propel the story along, which we won't talk about possibly, but there's a really strong narrative drive. And one of the things I did want to ask you, Isy, was did you know where it was going when you were writing it, or did it sort of develop?
Well, both really. So I did have a plan, because I always think I hadn't written a novel before, and when I had the conversation about writing one, I had a different editor. I didn't know that editors move around quite a lot, so I had one editor who was like 10 years younger than me, and it was like really weird to have a meeting, and I was like, you're younger than me? Oh yeah, I'm just getting older. And she was really nice, and she said, have you thought about writing a novel? And I said, yes, I'd like to write one. And she said, well, write down an idea. And then she left to start a Mexican street food business. So I never saw her again. I imagined this meeting. Anyway, her name was Jane, which is sort of half what I called it, Jane. And then I got a different editor, and then I took so long to write the proposal because I had another kid. That she then left, not to start a Mexican street food business, I don't know what she wanted to do. So then I didn't have an editor for ages. Actually, that was quite good because I sort of still had a potential deal with the publisher,
Right.
but I wasn't assigned an editor.
Okay.
And it
But
gave
was
me
that quite hard?
freedom.
Was anyone in touch with you going, what's happening? Is
No,
it-
and me and my literary agent sort of did it between us.
Right.
But the one who went to start the Mexican street food business, I'd said to her jokingly, maybe I should read a book about how to write a novel, and I thought she'd say, "Oh no, darling," and she was like, "Yeah, you should." Oh yeah, probably should actually.
Which
But
one did you choose?
So I read two. I read Into the Woods,
Oh, yeah.
which some of you might have read, which is very good, and that's a bit. I think it's a bit longer and it's good. It's a bit, perhaps a bit more kind of serious. And then I read the one that you recommended, which is called Take Off Your Pants,
Oh, yeah.
which sounds really dodgy.
Yeah.
But it's the American pants.
Yeah,
isn't
my,
it?
my cousin's wife is a romance novelist, and she recommended it because she churns these books out. So I was going, oh my god, it's really hard work to write a book, isn't it? She goes, yeah, sometimes it can take as long as 6 months. And then she recommended, so I recommended this to Izzy, and it does, yeah, and it is like, you go,
Brilliant.
but it's really good. It's basically going, don't let any shit stand in your way, just get on and do it, really.
Yeah, and it gives like Pocahontas and Jaws, and it like shows you what all stories have in common in a really kind of pure way. It's almost like if you'd never turned a computer on, it's telling you how to use Microsoft Word and Excel, not necessarily how to like reboot the whole thing. But
Yeah.
do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think,
It's
yeah,
really
those
clear.
sort of, and Into the Woods as well, I think, which is, because it's often about screenplay, Into the Woods, isn't it? It's about TV writing and film
Yeah.
writing things. But it is that about how to structure a story. So I just wonder,
Yeah.
did you like really work at that, on that proposal, so that when you sat down to write the first sentence of the first scene or wherever it is you chose to start, that you kind of had that sense? Or did it still not help when it came to it?
No, it did really help, and I did work really hard on the kind of this happens then, and then there has to be this inciting incident and so on.
Yeah.
And I did, and then I knew the structure of it, but there was a kind of, I didn't know how it would end, but I knew it would, that what I wanted to happen to her emotionally, but not how it would happen. But I found it extremely useful. But I had written a few scenes before I started.
And do you find that something you do, that you'll write a scene that might end up 2/3 of the way through just because of it's something else
yes.
to write?
Yes, I did, and I felt like I knew. The character of Jane is, she's quite an anxious person, isn't she? But she's also quite funny and a bit arrogant, and she has to move back to her hometown. She's quite snobby at first about moving back, and it was nice to know kind of the essence of her.
Yeah.
Through.
Was she
writing
always
these
your
short
central
bits
character?
before I started writing in earnest? Yeah. But it was quite different at the beginning with the Mexican street food girl. It was about her dad dying, and it
Right.
was really different actually. And there was a threesome in it where the guy was just walking around trying to talk about sport, and the girls were ignoring him, and it was kind of quite funny.
We've all
but-
been there.
Yeah. But I knew it just didn't quite work.
Yeah.
But I kind of had, and that's what I mean about having no editor. It was quite lovely to sort
Yeah.
of go, I'm going to try this, and then.
And is that how, do you think, working through all those ideas that didn't sort of go anywhere, do you think that's how you developed the character that she became?
No, I think she sort of, I knew
She
always
was,
what she was.
right,
Yeah.
right.
It was just more the situation to put her into, I think.
Yeah. There is so I don't know if any of you have read the book so far. So there's this central character, Jane, who ends up moving home, doesn't she, back to her parents. So she comes from a little town called Foley, which is, am I right in saying it's slightly based on where?
Yeah, it's slightly based on where I'm from,
Which is
in Derbyshire.
in
Yeah.
Matlock, and one of the things I really, there's a lot of very funny stuff about the character Jane says something or thinks something, and she goes, I'd have never thought that when I lived in London. And it's like these completely two different mindsets that go on. But there are lots of really brilliant characters in the book, but I found the character of the town as important as any other character in it. What was it? Does it feel to you that character of the town was vital?
Yeah, it did actually, but I've never heard it put like that. Yeah, I think it did, and it wasn't. Although it kind of was based on Matlock, I made it smaller than Matlock.
Right.
And there are. I don't know if anyone's been to Matlock, but maybe you come from a similar place. It's quite a small market town, but it's really quite bohemian and quite creative. There's a lot of people in. Like I was at school with the lead singer from Gomez and stuff, and it's sort of quite a kind of liberal place, really. And it was a really great place to grow up. But there were quite a lot of like characters, around, and there's quite a lot of drug taking, to be honest, as you often get in those sort of quite picturesque towns that are far away from lots of, sort of big shops and stuff. So we used to just go into like this derelict school and do Ouija boards, and we used to and it was sort of a brilliant upbringing in a way. So it was a way to kind of include elements of that without it being about me, because she isn't me, and Foley isn't Matt, but I was able to draw on bits of myself and bits of my friends.
Well, it felt very clearly. I as someone who's lived in London all his life, I really like this depiction of a small town, which is not somewhere I've ever lived. And there's a place in it as well called the Arch, isn't there? Which is a strand of the story. Which that was very vivid to me as well. This what is happening about saving the Arch and all this kind of stuff, and that was very powerful. And I kind of felt that as much as the characters. When you were writing it, were you very? I mean, you do lots of different things, and how was your? Did you manage to put people go? When you read those books about writing, they go trying to be up at 5 a.m. and do your first 1,000 words before breakfast. Yeah. Oh, okay. And did you manage to have a routine like that? Did you want a routine like that?
I did a little bit of that, but I just had a young child when I started it, and then had another baby in the middle of it. So I sort of tried to do that, and then the baby was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning anyway. So I was like, I'm going to get up at 2 in order to do 2 hours work before he gets up. No, I'm just going to go insane. So it was ways of finding pockets of time, and that was a bit tricky, especially in lockdown. When lockdown hit, I had just handed in the first draft, and I was really glad about that, because then I was getting notes from my third editor, who hasn't left to open her own street food business. She's called Lettuce though, so it actually would work. She was really great. Ellie Doughty ICE, which I hadn't ever heard of. She's so great, and from the beginning she sort of really got it. She gave me these notes at the beginning of lockdown, and then that was in a way the hardest bit, even though I felt that writing the first draft was difficult, because it's like, someone said the other day, writing a first draft of anything, it's like you're kind of gathering all the materials and assembling it, but also living in it at the same time. And I did find that at times that I was sort of trying to hold it up, but I also did really, really enjoy it in the way that you can enjoy going for a run in the rain, where you feel like, oh my god, I'm so alive. I sort of felt like that writing the first draft. And then when I got my notes and was doing the rewrites, that was in lockdown, and that was hard. Because we were all in different situations in lockdown, weren't we? But having young kids and trying to work was my hardest problem, and trying to feel like I was giving them time, and also I had this deadline, so I'd sort of go up to the spare room and then look at my notes, but sometimes my brain just couldn't, especially early on. This is not set in a pandemic, and I couldn't imagine anything ever not being set. And they were like in the pub, and I was like, they're in a pub. They're in a pub, they're sitting next to each other, and they're eating sausage rolls. Like, is that ever going to happen again? So that was really weird. And then actually, as the months went on, it just helps to have a deadline, doesn't it? I was like, well, you've got to imagine those sausage rolls. The
sausage rolls haven't stuck with me, but I'm going to go back now and check them.
They're only mentioned once, actually.
And were you managing to, with 2 small kids, like, were you trying to go, I'm going to get 500 words, just something done every day, or?
Yeah, I did, and I think I'm really results orientated. Like, I think I respond quite well to that. If you read a lot of writing things, they'll say, like, aim for X amount a day. So I spent a lot of time Googling how many words different writers do.
And that, in a way, is some of the work done. If it says write 1,000 words a day, but you spend an hour Googling, you only need to do 400.
Exactly. So I think the only person who does more than about 1,000 to 1,500 is Philip Pullman, who does. Is that right?
I've never heard of him. What's he done?
Yeah, exactly. So I think he just works in that sort of 9 to 5 way. He often produces a lot more than that. But it made me feel a lot better that most people were producing between like 500 and 1,500 on this website. And so I would aim for 1,000 a day. And then that is one of the things that made me feel like, good, is it? Because I think when you are creating something, it's quite chaotic and you're trying to pull a lot of strands together. So for me, it's really good to have something kind of linear through that. It's like, this is what you're aiming for. It doesn't matter if you don't necessarily hit it every day, but it's like a thing to aim for. However, that kind of went to pot when we were doing homeschooling and other bits and bobs of work as well, and in lockdown that normally I would have been able to give a lot more.
And you were having to do it at home, I guess, voiceovers.
Yeah, all doing it at home.
Yeah.
And I did a voiceover under the ironing board really early on. I'm very bad with technology, as you know. And we'd been given this mic, and my back had gone. I went to the woods near Farquhar Road with the buggy and lifted it up really awkwardly, and just felt I've got an inflammatory joint disease, and I felt this twang in my back, and then basically couldn't move from my neck down to my bum for like 4 weeks. So I just lay in bed, and like, so all that kind of stuff happened, and then I was trying to do all the rewrites at the same time, and the homeschooling and stuff. So yeah.
I mean, basically, it doesn't come as a surprise. I don't have any children, and me and my partner sat at home, and we found it really stressful, and we didn't do anything.
I just remember you saying you were like having a really nice time.
I know, it was awful. Izzy and I did a
Yeah.
gig the other day together, and I was trying out stuff for this new radio series, and I did mention that I was thinking of writing this episode about how I had a really lovely lockdown, and there was this a much less generous noise than that went through the audience when I said that. It was this kind of So I mean, obviously it was really painful and difficult, but oh my god! And I was thinking like, what you know, you were saying you had this back problem, you had a new child, you had a child who's getting older, you were homeschooling, you were doing voiceovers. All we did was buy leisure wear on Amazon.
The ironing board, I know what I was going to say. So my back had gone. So because of voiceovers needing a soft surface, which I didn't really know, I was under this ironing board with a duvet over the top of the ironing board, trying to use this mic for the first time, with 3 people from NatWest, who the voiceover was for, and 3 people from the advertising agency on Zoom, which I'd never used before, and I'm not very good at technology, and both kids crying, and me sitting cross-legged for 2 hours, and my back just sort of, and then I ended up telling Alice to fuck off in front of, like, Alice is my partner, in front of all these people on Zoom who were just like, and that was a real kind of great point of moment of going,
this is going really well. Well, at least I'm getting 500 to 1,000 words done a day. Do you have any sort of funny little superstitions about writing? Do you feel like you have to have a certain type of notebook and a certain type of pencil with you, or can you do anything?
No, I think I used to have that about, so I've been doing stand-up for a long time. I used to always have to have a cigarette before I wrote stand-up. I feel like that's like, you know, like being 14, going, I've got to always read Sartre on a Tuesday night. So I used to always have that thing of like, I can't write without, and that's just obviously not true. And then once I gave up smoking, I was like, it was fine. I didn't have to have a fag. It was just a way of putting it off. And so, no, I don't. That was the only thing I ever had. And I just think, and I think anyone who's written anything, I think probably, maybe the exception is people who do writing full time and have got like a little shed at the end of their garden and have. But even those people, I think, probably have to fit in other things, like even doctor's appointments, or maybe if they have a family, lots of things to do with that, or other bits of work or whatever. I just think you have to grab moments wherever you can, and it might be dictating into your phone or writing on your hand, or you know, if I've got my computer, I'm glad, you know.
I know. I think actually, I always think when people just had notebooks and things. I remember reading a thing with J.G. Ballard about who wrote like dozens and dozens of books, and he very tragically lost his wife when they were both pretty young, and they had 3 very young kids, and he was bringing up his 3 kids on his own, and he would write, basically he said, in the hall, like as he was getting the pushchair ready, and he would scribble some stuff down and then write it up in neat while he was doing beans on toast for lunch. And I thought that was like, and I think you're right, you do just have to, you can't make excuses why you can't do it. And although, you see, when my mum learned to drive, she always had her driving shoes, and then the dog ate them, and she never drove again. So,
oh my god, I need to get a dog.
You don't want to get trapped down that one. The book is full of. I thought I would just do one more, and then thought maybe you could do a bit of a reading.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I was just. I don't know what bit you're going to choose. First of all, but the book is full of. Apart from Jane, who's the central character, there's lots of really rich, brilliantly drawn characters. Were there any of them that you enjoyed particularly discovering?
The mum. who I have to always say isn't my mum. The mum is quite neurotic, isn't she? And quite high energy. And
she's a pain in the arse.
Yeah. A better way of putting it. And she also cries really easily, which my mum does.
Right.
And that was really fun, just to make. It's really and actually I really liked writing, which I hadn't done before. So there are some quite sort of big farcical scenes in it, aren't there? Where lots of people stick their oar in. It kind of gets a little bit ridiculous, and then she starts crying. And I sort of really loved writing those bits.
Yeah.
So I think each character I really liked. Writing, and also the bookshop. So Jane goes back and when she gets back home, the reason she goes back is she finds out that her fiance has been cheating on her. She gets a job in her local bookshop, and she doesn't know anything about books, and the only book that she's recently read is Sharon Osbourne's autobiography, which she hasn't actually finished. And in fact the whole book is her trying to finish Sharon Osbourne's autobiography, and at one point I was going to call it Finishing Sharon Osbourne's autobiography. That might be really confusing, but I really liked writing the people in the bookshop as well. Stuart, the guy who owns it, and
well, I did do you find there's a very funny scene set in the bookshop? Was that one of the bits you were thinking
I
of
can.
reading?
Yes, sure. I'll do. So Jane has to host a Q&A. It's basically exactly like this, except with a sort of a poet who takes herself quite seriously from Manchester, and she hasn't read Fenella, that's the poet's book, so she sort of skims it. And that was one really fun thing to do. I'd never written a main character who was as flawed as Jane, and Jane is quite arrogant at the beginning, I think. Yeah. And she sort of thinks, I've been in London, I work in advertising, I don't have to read, it's fine. And it was really lovely writing sort of those aspects of her. So Jane has swatted up on the poet's book, and the Q&A has begun, and it starts with one of the poems from Fenella the poet. Cakes and ladders. I used to bake you cake, my love. I used to bake you cake. Then I saw you were a snake, my love. I saw you were a snake. I threw you in a lake, my love. I threw you in a lake. And now I stand and eat my cake while you get scoffed up by a hake. And though I pause to call you fake, I do not miss a single chance to bake for Jake. He's late, I ache for you, for him, for us, for them. And now my cakes go stale. Fenella slammed the book down onto her knee, glaring at her audience as if goading them to challenge the fact that her cakes go stale, perspiration glistening on her forehead. She'd been sweating since she arrived. She and Claire, a solemn woman she introduced as her manager, had crashed through the door at 5 to 8, their breathing ragged and their hats wet with drizzle, a distinct aura of hot, wet dog about them. Muttering about delayed trains and events in the middle of nowhere, she'd immediately begun to aggressively shed endless coverings of chiffon and velvet, like a pass the parcel that would never be finished. The excited audience had gazed at her, whispering. Tiny trinkets had emerged with the removal of each layer. A fox's mint rolled onto the floor, followed by a screwed up tissue, a tube of lip balm, 2 biros, a sanitary towel, a box of paracetamol, a single raisin. As I'd taken a final petrified glance, that's everything in my bag basically. As I'd taken a final petrified glance at my questions, I spied a woman with a string of tinsel around her neck. It was July, but it had been raining, so it could have possibly been acting as a scarf. Peruse the floor and lazily pocket the lip balm like she was choosing a prize at a tombola. Wow, I breathed from the seat next to Fenella, her first poem complete, the word stale fresh on her lips. That was powerful. She nodded once, but didn't respond verbally. Powerful indeed, I said, still nothing. I could hear my blood pumping in my ears. Time for my first question. So, Fenella, why do you write? She looked at a woman in the front row. Wow, she drawled. Hear that, love? Never had that one before. She turned to me at last. Who are your favourite 3 authors and why? She said. Fenella feels like asking a few questions tonight. Fenella, said Claire from the back. Fenella turned to me again. Favourite 3 authors and why? Go. My mind raced. Jane Austen, I said, because she changed the face of fiction. That sounded good, I thought. My mind was completely blank, though, and I couldn't think of a single other author. Susan Kennedy? Wasn't she a character from Neighbours? Who'd written Tricolor? My eyes darted frantically around the room until I spotted a book I recognised. Max Porter, I said. I hadn't read any of his books, but I knew they were well regarded. He's changed the face of grief. I was on a roll with this change the face of stuff. And Sharon Osbourne, I said, she's just changed her face.
Very good. Might I say powerful?
So, Izzy, why do you write?
Why do you write? And as I was doing the questions, like you know, things you mustn't say to people. Like I kept thinking, I'm going to say, why do you write? You know, no one wants to be asked that. That's a terrible thing. But talking of asking, does anyone have any questions?
Oh, that was a great segue.
Hello.
Talking of asking.
Yeah, talking.
Please can someone ask why do you write?
Like, anyone can do that question. Ask why do you write. Put your hands up. Go on, ask them. That's it. Oh, what's that at the back? Someone's asking why you write, Izzy.
Well, actually, I write because I've got a mortgage to pay.
That's a beautiful artistic reason. I tell you, there are. You talked about Jane as a character being quite arrogant, which oddly enough, as a reader, there's a funny bit. I think it's at the beginning where she says, "What's her surname? Is it
Wild Goose?"
Wild Goose. I'm Jane Wild Goose. Of course, I can do this, or something. And I never read it really as arrogance.
That's good. Yeah.
But there are these sort of big themes throughout it of anxiety and her fear of losing control of situations, and what is that? I don't know if that's anything to do in your life or in any way. I mean, we all have that to some degree. But what was that like exploring that?
It's good. So they're trying for a baby as well, her and her fiance. So there's a bit about that as well. And I definitely, when we started trying for our kids,
not me and Izzy.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. We wouldn't have got very far. I realised that I found it really difficult not to know when it was going to happen, and you know, we were very lucky in that we didn't have problems getting pregnant, and but it wasn't immediate for either of them, especially my daughter, and I was quite shocked at how quickly I was like, oh my god, and I realised that it's actually one of the first times I had to really leave things to fate. Right.
So I wanted to write about that, about how there is a funny side to trying for a baby, you know, with the sort of timing of it and stuff. I think you have to try and laugh about it and try and find some sort of joy in, you know, in the process. Just being. And the other thing is that Jane is really anxious about her health, and that's definitely my Achilles heel. And actually in the past, especially when I was stressed and I was doing too much, I would start to worry that something was going to go wrong with my health, like that I was going to get cancer or that I was going to...
To be fair, your back went, so
yeah, exactly, it's not unrealistic. And actually, I've had the back thing for... I know what you mean, in a way, yeah. My dad had a stroke quite young, and I sometimes wonder if I'd sort of didn't necessarily have that idyllic childhood of nothing. But, you know, who knows. But that used to be my thing, that I would Google things and be like, oh my god, I need to go and get this checked out. And it is so much better now, just through, I think, chilling out, having a bit of therapy after my dad died and stuff like that, which wasn't from a stroke, it was later. But so I've always wanted to sort of write about that, especially now I feel that I'm kind of
further away.
Yeah,
right.
But wasn't really interested in writing about my own feelings about it. For whatever reason, I didn't really analyse it. It just felt maybe a bit too personal or whatever.
Yeah.
So it was a really lovely way of kind of using that and putting it into a character, but then also giving her things with her anxiety that I don't have, like this fear of hospitals that she's got.
Yeah.
And so I really researched that, and it's, you know, it's a sort of very major thing for some people.
Yeah.
So it was. I really enjoyed the process of kind of hand-picking, without really thinking about doing so, kind of things from my own life and things from my friends. And the really good thing about, so with a memoir,
I was going to say,
my memoir, which is here.
Is that here? Oh, that's good.
So a lot of that was about relationships, and I sometimes really felt like my hands were tied because I wanted to write in detail about a relationship, or even about a fling or a one-night stand, because often there were funny things.
Yeah.
But I sort of thought, oh my god, if they read it,
Yeah.
and the great thing about writing a novel is you can kind of put all that stuff in, but change their name and say, oh no, it wasn't about you. Why do you think it was about you? That's brilliant, and that's one of the reasons I really enjoyed doing it.
I expressly said that character was 5'8" and you are 5'7". There's no way it's the same person. Oh, was there? I mean, I'm not going to ask you to name names, but are there bits in that where you did manage to do that quite a lot with this?
Yeah, I think so. Like even without realising it, and you see your friends. I'm 43, and I've sort of now seen a lot of friends in different relationships, and I've had lots of different relationships, and there's something really lovely about sort of having access to all that and going, oh, I'll use that. And again, without really realising it. And just sort of reading it back sometimes I think, oh my God, that's exactly like so-and-so, but I didn't realise it at the time.
Actually, have you had that from friends or family? Has anyone gone,
No, but my mum definitely was like, I was really nervous about mum reading it, because the mum is in some ways similar to mum, especially in how easily she cries. And before mum had read it, and also because my mum is really honest about anything that I do. So like when I did The Sound of Music when I was 16, and there was a bit where I was supposed to give the starting note on my guitar for an a cappella version of The Hills Are Alive with The Sound of Music, but I'd been messing about with Rolf backstage. I was Liesl, and probably fancied him, like swinging the guitar around, hitting it into things, so it was completely out of tune. So it was Liesl, give us a C, and then it just went so then no one knew what note to start on. It was all a bit of a shambles. And afterwards I said to Mum, well, what did you think? Because I always wanted to be an actor or a writer really from the beginning. And she was like, you were adequate. And, and I've always remembered that. And not in a kind of like, but trying to kind of trip me up way or try. But she's just completely honest. And if she does something, she'll be like, that was great because of this and this and this. But I knew that she would not just say, oh, well done, darling, your first novel. So I was kind of, and there was the added thing that like, she isn't loads like the mum in it, so I was like, oh my God, but luckily she liked it, and that really did mean a lot to me, actually.
Did she read any of the, I know very quickly you mentioned my name, lots of other people, we've sort of looked at drafts as you went through. Did your mum look at anything?
She did look at a really early couple of pages when I'd had some feedback. So early on, my literary agent, who is great, Robert, who I've known for quite a long time, is also always honest, and he said to me, because you're writing a novel, don't think I'm writing a novel and kind of do it in like the way that I think I should write a novel. And I was like, I won't do that, I've been doing stand-up since like 2002, I've written other stuff. He was like, okay, don't do it. And then I did exactly that.
And what did you mean by that?
I think what he meant was, it was almost like I had, instead of just writing kind of, I suppose, from the heart, it was like I was trying to imagine what a reader would think of it at the same time, rather than, and almost...
Which I imagine kind of stops you in your tracks.
Yeah, like it was only to a degree, but I think it was enough to just kind of... And then also what I did was, I made it about quite a serious thing. I made it about like an abusive relationship, and that on top it was quite jolly, like it kind of has ended up being, although there are some serious moments in it, aren't there? There's this undercurrent, as you say, of her anxiety and stuff. But with the first draft, there was this secret diary that revealed her sort of horrible life. And I just don't think that, I think tonally, it was almost like trying to splice two books together. But I don't regret doing that draft, because I think you sort of have to. I'm sure there'll be people here who've written things. Yeah, it is annoyingly, throwing things away is part of the process of writing it. But he did ring me as I was about to go into Baby Bongos in Dreamcatcher, which is now closed, as I'm sure you all know. And he rang me and said, he doesn't sound like you.
That's interesting. Yeah. So he felt that it should be Isy Suttie's voice.
He felt like he said, you have a voice, that is your voice.
Right.
Don't try and kind of use long words, essentially. I think that was what I was trying to do.
Although
there are words in it that are more than 3 syllables.
Yeah, there are some long words in there. Advertising. Nobody's idea
is trying. One of the words in the title's got 2 syllables.
But I'm kind of like, it's written in the first person and it's not you. So in a way, why would it be your voice?
I think what he meant by my voice wasn't necessarily like that it was about me, but just that I suppose everyone has a voice.
Right.
And it was like I tried to kind of he was absolutely right.
Right.
I had tried to, looking back, it didn't ever feel quite right. It was almost like an exercise.
Yeah,
And also writing it in the third person didn't feel right.
Oh, so you were writing it in the third
Yeah, there was
person to
a
start?
draft, a bit of a draft of that as well.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And did you find, because I know sometimes with stuff that, reading it out loud reveals...
Yeah, that's what you've always said to me, and I did that this time. And
Had
it
you
was
not
really
done that
useful.
before?
No,
You
I
said
didn't
no.
do it with the first one.
Right. And how different, and I know obviously, one's a memoir, one's fiction. What difference did that make? Did it make any difference? What did
I think it makes a difference to dialogue.
Yeah.
Because I think dialogue can be a really hard thing to nail. And I often read books. You said this about Iris Murdoch before.
She's brilliant at dialogue.
That you can have, and maybe you've done this as well in the audience, like you can have a book that you really love, but sometimes the dialogue can feel, I don't know. Like
I think it's a fashion thing. I think I like the Iris. As a teenager, I used to have a cigarette holder and an Iris Murdoch novel at all times. And in the Iris Murdoch novels, I don't know if it was like, they were 20 years old then, some of them, but like her dialogue was like a London Review of Books essay. Somebody would say, "Did you enjoy that, Pamela?" And then she would talk for like 20,000 words, give you a reasoned answer. And I think sometimes when you read older books, that's an extreme.
Yeah,
but I think now there's a much greater closeness to real life.
Yes, I know what you mean. Actually, it was sort of used for in a different way in the past. It wasn't necessarily supposed to be 100% realistic. Yeah.
It is actually. And I've just finished a novel that's got a character called Lettuce in it.
Oh, have you?
Yeah. I've been trying to get that in for ages now. I want something come back to me. Are you going to be writing more novels?
I think I might write a young adult book.
Right.
The reason I think I might is because I've got an idea, but there's quite a lot of competition in the sort of 8 to 10 girl band, which you probably we had this conversation. They were like, there are lots and lots of books about kind of quirky 8 to 10-year-old, 8 to 12-year-old girls. But I have got another idea that I think
for an adult novel.
Well, for like a children's
Oh, for the children.
book, yeah.
Right, yeah.
So that's a really, really early days.
Yeah.
But I'm quite excited about it, and it's something that I tell my daughter every night. So it's grown organically out of.
Well, she'll have to wait because it's taken 4 years for her to get a jumper, poor Betty. So
Oh yeah, I've been knitting a cat jumper for 4 years, but I have actually finished it now.
Like I said to Izzy, have you had to sort of change the dimensions of it as she's got older? It's got bigger and bigger.
It's actually very hard. I don't know if there's any knitters here, but it was Intarsia, and it was the first time I've done Intarsia, and it was 2 cats looking over a brick wall at a mouse,
which is
which goes into either pocket. So actually, I'm lucky it only took me 4 years and not 8.
I think Betty's little brother Steffi will be wearing it. I think it'll be a family heirloom. Should we have another chunk of the book?
Yes, of course, yes.
To read. And you can put your mind to some questions. I wouldn't like to say that you let yourself down before, but
Don't forget, you've always got why do you write? You're talking about her relationship with Jonathan, who has cheated on her. Okay. On my birthday morning, he produced a homemade cake, which was supposed to have my initials inside it in food colouring, in a sort of cross section, like when you bite into a piece of rock. But he'd done it wrong, and the whole of the inside was a mouldy looking grey-green. I loved this even more than if it had worked, which he must have predicted. Maybe he'd never even tried to make the letters in the first place. Then he gave me a bear from the Build-A-Bear shop, which said in a deep, creepy voice, "I watch you while you're sleeping." He'd also bought me a silver bracelet with 5 charms on it, one for each year we'd been together. There was a teapot because it had taken ages for him to learn to make tea just the way I liked it, a heeled boot for Italy where we went on our first ever holiday, a J for Jane, and a horseshoe which meant absolutely nothing to either of us. Last was the charm of a tiny bird hatching from a sapphire encrusted egg. That's a symbol for, when we, he said. As I cried briefly into his shoulder, he always said, as he always did, we will, we will, we will. This was the most physical contact we'd had for a long time, apart from the stoic monthly attempts at baby making, which made the handmaid's tale look like 9.5 weeks. After breakfast, he took me on the London Eye and kept his hand on my leg the whole time because of a recent row about lack of bodily contact. His hand sat frozen in place like the grabber from a claw game in an amusement arcade. He took me for afternoon tea where he asked strangers to take photos of us and made jokes with them about how difficult camera phones are to operate. He didn't look at his phone once, which highlighted how much he normally did. This effort of abstinence didn't stop his right hand from occasionally flickering forwards. This bit was cut. So this is the proof. See if you agree that this sentence should have been cut. Lettuce thought that this made him sound a bit weird. This effort of abstinence, i.e. not looking at his phone, didn't stop his right hand from occasionally flickering forwards in a phone shape to grab at thin air. Before he remembered his phone wasn't on the table. So next to that she put, I think this makes him look a bit weird. But actually, yeah, I don't think you necessarily do that. And all the time it was like there was an extra skin around him, a slimy film only I could see. Every action was too perfectly executed. His laughs were slightly too loud. His laid-back demeanour too studied. I could feel him distancing himself and moving in too close at the same time. He was doing what he thought was best in the circumstances, because in the same way that a murderer changes out of their blood-stained clothing into a dressing gown and Garfield slippers, cheats aren't just cheats. They're actual people too. They're feeling their way. They're like someone making Cornish pasties from scratch the first time. They don't know how things are going to turn out either, and if all the effort will be worth it in the end. Rachel was more than a Cornish pasty though. She was from Wimbledon for a start, and her filling was lukewarm at best. She was a property developer, so she probably had no filling at all. Just a wasteland inside. Single £50 notes cartwheeling past her pitted heart.
They can find you a book for your girlfriend, your husband, your girl or your boy. And if you've got a need for an uplifting read, Justine and Jonathan can pick out a book you'll enjoy. What a book at the Bookseller Crow on the hill. What a book at the Bookseller Crow on the hill. Crystal Palace Hill it is. But you can order online.